Hello, my dear viewers. I never tire of thanking you for supporting my YouTube channel. Today's topic is unveiling pain. And this topic came up in the Stalker group, which meets on Tuesday evenings. And what I'm about to share is truly a product of our collective effort. Our entire group discussed this topic, and I gathered, so to speak. In my view, the key points about pain. Pain, allows a person to enter a certain status, such as a role or position. When we are in pain, we don't perceive pain the way we do other emotions. For example, anger. With anger, it's clear, I am angry. Or I feel envy. But pain doesn't register for me as an emotion, as a feeling. Pain, by its very nature, is total. And if we were to imagine our psyche as a set of light bulbs, each emotion would be a bulb of a certain color. Then pain would be this big red lamp. When it lights up, it drowns out all the other colors, and inside everything seems red. If a person unfortunately falls completely captive to intense pain, it is quite profoundly difficult for them to effectively get out of that situation, because such overwhelming pain inherently creates an undeniable, powerful, and dominant force. A dominant force is essentially when there is a highly charged part in our psyche that constantly pulses and sends out a certain signal. And a person, by actively recalling and deeply reflecting upon these memories, reinforces these specific reflex arcs and thereby makes the dominance of that pain strong and unbreakable. In other words, I find myself unable to prevent myself from returning to that very moment. Everything reminds me of it. But as soon as I go there in my memories, I make this dominant force even stronger. In other words, the bars of the prison I'm in become even more powerful. So what is so sweet about pain? First of all, when a person is in pain, there is no sense of badness in them. That is, when I am in pain, my self-aggression and self-criticism decrease significantly, and this creates a feeling that I am not bad, that I am better. I think all of you can recall moments, like, for example, when you were sick, and during illness, it's as if you stop demanding things from yourself. You stop demanding achievements, money, success, and so on, because after all, you are sick. And so holding on to pain becomes an opportunity to avoid self-criticism. But as soon as the self-criticism disappears, we slip into a state of permissiveness. This is the state of a person who is unwell. A person who holds on to pain is a person who is sick. I am in pain, illness pain. And then it seems as if the person is allowed to be more undisciplined, to be lazier, to give up on certain goals. And we fall into a state of anything goes, where much feels allowed. And within this state, we stop pressuring ourselves with control and conformity. It's like dough coming out of a vat. Once it's out, it can't be gathered back in. In other words, allowing yourself an anything goes state is easy, just as developing an addiction is easy, but getting rid of it is much harder. In addition to this, our significant pain allows us to demand a certain attitude from others toward us. When I am unwell, look, I am not at fault. If I am not at fault, if I have no complaints against myself, then I am in the right. I am right in what I feel, in how I behave. And we begin unconsciously to demand a certain attitude toward us, as if we are the ones who are hurting. And a person, for example, who has experienced a loss, some people painfully grieve all their lives for the loss of an ideal world they wish they had. They feel robbed, deprived, and hurt deep inside. But outwardly, they become demanding rather than deprived, consuming rather than robbed. And instead of feeling hurt, a sense of vindictiveness appears. And at the same time, the person, this vindictiveness, this demanding attitude toward others, they do not recognize as something cruel because all of it grows out of their pain. That is, from the inside it looks different. And when I have nurtured this pain, I tend to it like a little garden. I constantly return to it, I remember. So around this pain, an entire religion forms for me. It's as if there were an altar at home, an altar before which I constantly kneel and pray. And in doing so, I keep renewing and renewing this connection with the pain. That is why, in my view, it is dangerous to revisit traumatic events, to constantly remember them, to keep talking about them, for example, during sessions. Because by doing so, a person, it's as if they are reporting from there. This information is important, but at the same time, they are reinforcing the bars of this pain. And you can spend 3 years going to a psychologist, crying about your traumas, but your real life will not change. Although emotionally, it may seem as if some intense events are happening every time, at every meeting. And when we are drawn to memories of what is painful for us, it can be quite difficult to restrain ourselves. This is because of those moments of benefit that I mentioned earlier. A person who creates an altar of pain, this can be created around a specific event, or it can be more general. A person in a general state of being a victim, they begin as if to subordinate the whole world to this religion. That is, others as if too, must become believers, must become followers of this sect. They must behave towards me accordingly because I am in pain. And this altar turns a person into an actor who plays the leading role in the drama. So in fact, when I am in a story of pain, a story of resentment, a story of loss, I am in a drama, but I am in the leading role. I play the main role there, and this gives a sense of significance. Because, for example, if someone has lost a loved one or someone is ill, at first people treat them with sympathy, asking questions and showing concern, with words of comfort. But at some point, people get caught up in their own problems, get distracted, and that special status is gone. And a person who has grown fond of this special status feels a sense of loss when others no longer give it to them. And then there may even be resentment toward those who do not respect their pain. And the person, unconsciously, if they don't realize that their sense of significance comes from their pain, they might join groups of people who share the same pain. Or they try to be part of live groups or groups on social media. It's as if they constantly want to talk about it, reliving the status of being the main character in a drama over and over again. And in doing so, as I mentioned earlier, the walls of the prison only become thicker. In other words, a person actually needs to escape from this prison, but instead they do everything to make the prison even stronger. A person who grows out of pain, who makes pain the meaning of life, who makes suffering the meaning of life, allows themselves to be cruel in their relationships with others. It's as if they are permitted to be unempathic because they are too fixated on themselves. Yes, for example, I have experienced grief, but caring for other people, understanding that I shouldn't unload this onto them, allows me to lessen the boundaries of my own pain. But if I don't know how to care for others, then for me, what I feel, what another person feels is not a reason to change my behavior or to change my state. And then other people will seem increasingly cruel and increasingly repulsive to me. This world that wounds me, this world that does not want to treat my pain with respect, this world that does not want to take my uniqueness into account. And then such people form aggressive minorities who attack those who do not want to become followers along with them of this sect, of this religion. When a person listens to others who are in pain, people say you should gather in a group and share this pain, but our inner beast will feel a certain malicious satisfaction that someone else is also suffering. And many groups that dwell on this pain become toxic because that's where the path to rivalry begins. I observe on social media, when someone writes, "We had a strike," others reply, "Well, here in Zaporizhia, if you lived here, you'd know how many strikes we get." You see, there's no empathy here. Or you write, "I don't know, we have no electricity." And someone responds, "We haven't had electricity for 2 days already." So you see, it's as if I have to start competing in the amount or intensity of my pain to prove that you're hurting, but I'm hurting even more, that things are even worse for me. You're sick, but I'm even sicker. And then when a person enters this bubble, at some point they just remove reality from their friends list. They unsubscribe. In other words, a person moves from living in the real world to living in a world of their own pain. They nurture it, they cherish it, and they feel a sense of significance. They feel their own infallibility, their own sanctity, because someone who is suffering is not attacked in the same way. There's less aggression. And at some point, reality starts to drift further and further away, like a ship sailing off into the sea. And this is that ship sailing away. This drifting away makes it difficult for a person to re-establish contact with reality. It's easy to enter that state, but hard to come back out. Share your own observations about pain. And I would like to draw your special attention to the fact that when we base our actions or decisions on pain, when we use it as a foundation for what we do or say, we end up betraying ourselves. Pain is a poor advisor. Pain clouds our judgment, but pain gives us the presumption of innocence. And a person who makes pain their cult will inevitably become embittered. Inevitable. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that in reality we must learn to live with pain, the eternal pain of losing a world we cannot wash away. Those who have come to terms with the loss of that world, in my view, are granted the opportunity to realize themselves beyond it. But the person who tries to preserve that withered little garden of their own world and insists on playing the role of martyr, the role of the suffering one within it, gains only a false sense of significance, but does not receive the blessings of the world that could have been theirs. The recorded version of the webinar Self-Reflection will be available for the English-speaking audience. It's about thinking realistically about yourself and building mental models that help you understand the causes and consequences of both your own behavior and the behavior of others. Feel free to join us, and with that, I say goodbye. See you soon.